Hello, I'm gonna do informational speech on the salton sea pollution and how it affects us. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Have you ever smelled the fresh scent of decaying fish when you step outside your house, not knowing the dust around you is contains harmful pollutants that affect your health and lungs? I chose this topic because I live near the Salton Sea and I experience stuff from it. I experience bad smells, dust, and other problems. I'm not the only person affected by this issue. The rest of my community is also affected by this issue. As I researched this issue, I soon learned that dust and the bad smells are not just the only problems. It's something much more dangerous. As many of us live near the Salton Sea and experience problems from it since it's an environmental problem that affects our daily lives. Today I'm going to talk about what is happening in the Salton Sea and what is creating the pollution and how it affects us and what we could do to solve these issues. To start off, I want to talk about the the shrinking of the Salton Sea has increased environmental pollution such as dust pollution. As the shoreline decreases, the more the lake bed is exposed more since the lake is covering the water is covering the lake and the what lies underneath is dust, which means the lake bed. According to Hibbs and colleagues in 2026, retreat of the Salton Sea shoreline has exposed excessive playa, increasing dust emissions and promoting wetland restorations along the lake margins. As more of the lake bed is exposed, more dust is prone to be picked up by dust and spread into nearby communities. Humans play a huge factor to polluting the Salton Sea, such as agricultural runoff. As the pollution of the Salton Sea becomes more concentrated and becomes a larger amount due to the water shrinking, more dust is blown into nearby communities. Now that I've discussed what is happening in the Salton Sea, I'm going to discuss how it affects us and nearby communities. As the dust from the exposed lake bed is picked up, it lowers air quality and causes the increase of respiratory problems. Research done by Lipsy and colleagues in 2006 found that older adults, children, and people with asthma and other respiratory problems are especially vulnerable to polluted air. And in addition, a 2002 analysis by Stephen and colleagues concluded that exposure to polluted air increases the risk of respiratory illness and other long-term health problems. According to Cowley and colleagues in 2012, studies of dust from drying lakes, including the Salton Sea, suggest that exposure may lead to asthma-like symptoms, increasing respiratory infections and other long-term health effects. Basically, that means the drying of the lakes increase air pollution that affect people with already pre-existing health problems, causing more damage to them, but also could create new problems to people who haven't experienced it. Knowing these health issues, what could we do to solve these issues? One solution is expanding wetland restoration projects. Wetland restoration projects can cover the lake bed, preventing dust to be picked up, and improve wildlife habitation. For example, we could plant plants. The plants will provide new habitats for wildlife while also holding the soil down with the roots, preventing the dust to be picked up once again. Another restoration project would be, or a way to prevent the dust to be picked up or cause further harm to pollution towards the Salton Sea, is improving agriculture practices. We could do this with improving chemical usage and irrigation practices, as well as economic friendly chemicals such as fertilizers, insecticides, and pesticides. Agriculture runoff is very important towards causing pollution towards the Salton Sea, as many farmers and nearby farms use the Salton Sea as a way as a landfill to dump agricultural runoff. And these agricultural runoffs contain phosphate from chemicals and fertilizer. And the phosphate creates algae blooms that cause the depletion of oxygen for the fishes, causing fishes to die, as well as the chemicals that cause the acidic levels to rise. According to Trant and colleagues in 2025, between 70 and 90% of atmospheric anemia emissions in California swine weed grain badly comes from animal waste and fertilizer applications. By reducing fertilizer use and educating agriculture communities, harmful pollution can be reduced and air quality can be improved. Agriculture practices don't only affect us through the Salton Sea, but can affect us directly through the chemicals being spread over by wind. For example, my siblings have been affected by chemical usage since we live next to a farm. They were once outside and the chemicals were sent over by the wind, and they caused irritation and rashes. Finally, public education and government investments are necessary to protect the future of generations ahead. In conclusion, pollution in the Salton Sea is not just an environmental issue, it's a public health issue of the community. Today we discussed how the Salton Sea and the shrinking of it increases dust pollution and how it affects us and the community nearby, and why it matters to us, and how we could solve these issues. The Salton Sea is a part of our home and communities. By providing new ways to fund these restoration efforts and reduce pollution, we're able to create a future for ourselves that we're able to sustain and be healthier for ourselves and our future generations. Thank you for listening.